Namaskar. My name is Abhay Kumar and I am one of the members of the faculty for Indian Polity, which is part of the General Studies syllabus. And Indian Polity, which is the system of governance of our country, is an important pillar of the UPSC civil service examination. For example, in the preliminary examination, you can expect generally about 15 to 20 questions out of 100. And at the mains stage in the general studies paper 2, about 8 to 10 questions out of 20, which is about half of the paper. But Indian polity has a larger relevance for the civil services beyond just the examination, because once you will qualify for this exam and you will join the government, you will essentially be joining the same system of governance that we are studying. So in other words, it will be apt to say that you're aspiring to join the Indian polity. Now, we at Vajiram and Ravi, we will focus first on the fundamentals of the subject and then also guide you to develop the analytical abilities where you can apply these principles on the events and the issues that are happening around us in our country and in the world. Because that should be the biggest focus when you are at the stage of exploring and understanding the space of civil service preparation. So on that note, let us try and learn a small topic today, which is the mercy powers of the President of India. President of India is the head of the Union Executive and has many powers. One of these powers, as given to us under Article 72 of the Constitution of India, is the mercy powers. Now, casually speaking, many times you will see aspirants and members of our society referring to this as pardoning powers. However, we must be careful with the usage of the terms, because pardoning is just one power. It is one of the powers that President has to give mercy. Now, the problem that happens is if you start combining all the various powers. Now, which are the other various powers? Let's just have a quick mention. So, at the highest level, we have the power to grant a pardon or to commute, that is called commutation, or to remit, that is called remission, or to grant a respite, or to give a reprieve. In our constitution, there is one more word mentioned, that is to suspend, but gradually you will understand that suspend is no different power other than this. It gets covered here only. So practically, if we understand this, we will be able to understand the powers of the President of India. Now, as you see, pardon is just one of the many powers. So if we combine all of them and say pardoning powers, we are likely to make mistake in certain situations. For example, we all know that similar to this power of the President in Article 72, Article 161 also gives the similar kind of power to the governors of the states. So the governor also has similar powers. And one thing you would have read and maybe heard also, that the governor cannot pardon a death sentence. Now, if you combine all of this, many times I have observed the aspirants thinking that if there is a death sentence, governor of a state cannot do anything. Now, that's not the case. Governor can only not pardon, but the other powers, they are there. Governor can commute a death sentence, for example. So, I would recommend that all of us start thinking of them as mercy powers, or if you feel the need to use another word, you can also refer to them as clemency powers, or say pardon and other powers. Pardoning is just one type of power. Now, let's briefly understand what these powers mean. And to understand that, the first thing we should have is little appreciation of the criminal justice system in our country. So whenever there is a criminal case, there is an accused, there is prosecution, and there is an entire procedure for the trial. And after the trial is complete, the court gives a verdict, or let's say simply a judgment. Now that judgment will have two parts to it. One part of the judgment is what we can understand as conviction. Conviction. Has the guilt been proved or not in the eyes of the court? So if the court says guilty, then comes the second part. But if the court says not guilty, then the person is free, or as you would have seen in the movies, they'll say ba izzat bari, you're released. But if conviction has been held by the court, then comes the second part, what we would like to say, sentence. What we can casually say, punishment, right? Then this sentence also has got two parts to it. The first part is the nature of the sentence, the nature, right? The severity, highly severe punishment or less severe punishment, severity, we'll see. And then the second is the quantum or the quantity of the punishment that has been given by the court. Now, nature, all of us understand that there are various levels of punishments in our penal code, the Nyaya Samhita, and the most severe punishment, the highest level, of course, is the penalty of death, capital punishment. But less than that is imprisonment, to be sent to jail. Now see, life imprisonment, the life part is the quantum, or let's say 10 years in jail or 5 years in jail or whatever. The nature is imprisonment, and the imprisonment itself is of two types. Rigorous imprisonment, which is again more severe, and a simple imprisonment. Rigorous and simple. Now in rigorous imprisonment, there are more restrictions on the amount of work that you have to do. Well, you don't get free food in the jail, you have to work, you have to earn a living, and the amount of time you have relaxed, you can meet visitors, etc. And it's little relaxed in the simple imprisonment case. Anyway, then the next level of punishment could be fines, like monetary fines. So either 500 rupees fine or 5,000 rupees or 5 lakh, that's the quantum part of it. And then after this, there is possibility of community service also, things like that. So that's our nature. Now there are 4 important terms I have mentioned here: conviction, sentence, nature, and quantum. If we understand these 4 words, then depending on what the president is going to change as a decision on the mercy petition, the different terms get used. For example, the only power of the president which can remove both the conviction and the sentence, both of them, that is pardon. When the president will change the nature, that means reduce the nature of punishment, that is commute. And when the president changes the quantum of the punishment given, that is to remit. And when it is temporary commutation, that is a respite. And the next word that I had mentioned, the reprieve. In reprieve, none of it gets changed. What gets changed is only the execution time. As in, whatever sentence has been given, you'll get the same nature and the same quantity, but not starting immediately after the period of reprieve. So somebody has been given, let's say, 5 years simple imprisonment. The reprieve will be the 5 years, and the simple imprisonment will remain as it is, but it will start, let's say, after 20 days. So the reprieve of 20 days has been given. So after 20 days, it will start. Now let's take quick examples to understand all these terms. Okay. So for example, somebody was given a death penalty and they approach the President of India, and the President of India takes a decision that I will convert the death penalty, the capital punishment, into a life imprisonment sentence. That will be considered commutation. And then let's say the person is now serving life imprisonment. Life itself means your natural life has to be spent in the jail. But after, let's say, 20 years they have spent in the jail, their behavior has been good, the reports of the jail authorities are all positive, and the ruling party decides that on a particular day of significance, maybe the birthday of founding leader of that party or something like that, they decide that we will release this convict. So what has happened? We have converted their life to now 20 years of jail practically. So we have remitted. And let us say there is a lady who is serving their time in jail and they have been given 5 years of rigorous imprisonment and she is pregnant. And during pregnancy, we know women need to be taken care of, and the amount of work they should do, the rest period, we need to take care. So let's say the lady approaches the authorities and the authorities decide that, okay, during the pregnancy, only during the pregnancy, your rigorous imprisonment is being converted to simple imprisonment. So what has happened? We have given her a respite. As the name suggests, little relief, but the punishment will come back once the temporary relief period is over. Similarly, let's talk about reprieve, where nothing gets changed, only we delay in the execution of the sentence granted. So, for example, a person has been given the death penalty and they approach the governor that, Mr. Governor or Madam Governor, please pardon me. And the governor, of course, cannot pardon. We know pardoning is not a power for death penalty that the governor has, but governor can definitely commute. But let us say the person is looking for mercy, complete pardon, which is a power only with the President of India, but they may not have time because execution has been scheduled. Governor can grant a reprieve. And mostly we will see that in our country, reprieve is a power that is used or that is granted mostly in situations of death row convicts to allow them some time to go and seek their mercy possibilities that they have. So this is how these powers can be understood. If you remember this and keep this thought in your head and revise it a few times, you will never make any mistake. Now, pardon, which is the highest level or the maximum possible mercy that the president can show, this is the only power, as I said, which removes the conviction as well as the sentence. That means in the eyes of the law, the person is not a criminal now. So, this kind of a power, that is the granting of pardon, it not only removes the conviction and the sentence, but also any associated disqualifications. For example, if somebody was given 5 years jail, rigorous imprisonment, under the Representation of People's Act, they cannot now contest election, let's say Lok Sabha election. But if the president grants a pardon, because their conviction and sentence both have gone, the disqualification will also go. So it's a very, very significant power. So it basically places the person who committed the crime in a position immediately before they committed the crime, as if they never committed the crime. This pardon can be granted before trial, during trial, or after trial. At any stage it can be granted. For example, in the United States in the 1970s, after the Watergate scandal, President Richard Nixon was there and he was found to be involved in the Watergate scam, and his impeachment and criminal conspiracy charges would be placed. So what he did, he resigned. And as the US polity works, their vice president becomes the president. Gerald Ford became the president, and the first thing Gerald Ford did, he pardoned Nixon. And nothing was initiated, nothing was happening. And Nixon now will not be tried for these criminal conspiracies. So it can be given before, during, or after the trial. But you don't have to wait till the final judgment. You can seek pardon at any stage. Now, Supreme Court of India has clarified that all these powers of the president to give mercy, they are not a discretionary power, and we must know this because being a parliamentary form of government, the president shall always be acting on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So, mercy power is also not a discretionary power of the President of India, but only to be exercised on the advice of Council of Ministers. Then, the Supreme Court says, the Supreme Court has held that this power of mercy is an act of grace. It is not a matter of right. That means it's an executive grace. Because we feel like it, we'll give you this mercy. If not, we will not give it. It cannot be demanded as a matter of right. And that is why the court has also held that there is no right of hearing for the petitioner before the president. There is no right of hearing. Because understand this, essentially the president here is exercising their executive function. It looks like a judicial power, right? Powers of the president may be judicial in nature like mercy, or may be legislative in nature like ordinance, but the function is always executive, which simply means that the president is not acting like a judge here. They are not to examine evidence or follow criminal procedure, nothing. They are not acting like a judge. They are acting in their capacity as the executive only. So it's an executive function. President does not start to sit on top of Supreme Court that way. Supreme Court's judgment, their verdict, it remains intact. It is not being overruled by the president. The only thing is, Constitution has granted some powers to consider special circumstances. Now, why this power has been given then? Well, there may be situations, for example, should not happen often, but it is possible that there was an error in the judicial process, in the verdict, or maybe the entire criminal procedure, the way it was implemented was unduly harsh, because the law is neutral for all, right? But there may be special circumstances. And executive is in the best position to understand, examine that. They may be affected by international relations or the image of India or public order. So based on that, they may be in a position to consider these special circumstances and take some mercy powers. This is the background of giving this power, right? But the main point being that since it is also an executive function of the president, it can be judicially reviewed. The courts have very clearly said, especially if the power is used with malefites. Malefites means with bad faith or bad intentions. Courts can definitely get into the picture. And by the way, this was one of the questions in the preliminary examination of 2025, that can there be a judicial review of the mercy power of the president? Absolutely. So with this, we have covered the fundamental principles and the ideas behind the mercy powers of the President of India. On that note, I wish you all the best in your journey for civil service examination and your grand aspiration to serve the people of our country. Do well. Jai Hind. Namaskar.